If we could grab our seats, please. Good afternoon, everyone. At the request of some of the members who wanted to get a nice overview of gaming in Maryland, we decided to put together this presentation and briefing. So I want to thank those who have come to participate. And I think we'll just dive right in unless there are any questions. Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My presentation has not been loaded, so we're going to do it old school off just the paper.
Okay.
I was asked to talk a little bit about the recent history of revenues from gaming in Maryland, along with the latest Board of Revenue estimates forecast. I'm going to start with sports wagering, which obviously doesn't have a lot of history. And that's page 1. Sports wagering began in fiscal 22, about halfway through the year, with 5 retail licenses at the 5 casinos. And I'll also start by apologizing.
For just 1 second. I'm sorry, too. Let me apologize. I just want to recognize that Senator Watson has joined us also. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to apologize. On the table underneath taxable win, it says licensee 85%. The next line should say blueprint fund 15%. That's the way sports wagering revenue is split. The taxable win is the total amount wagered less the various deductions for prizes and etc.
I apologize. Can you say that one more time?
The split on the line is missing underneath taxable win. It says licensee 85%.
Yeah.
The next line should say blueprint fund.
Oh, okay.
15%. It did at one point, I swear. I'm not sure what I did there. So I'm sorry about that.
Very good.
But that is a split, 85-15. So sports wagering begins in fiscal 22. Partway through fiscal 23, mobile wagering begins. And so that means fiscal 24 is going to be the first full year of sports wagering. And the top chart here on page 1 is the fiscal 22 actual, the fiscal 23 actual, and then the year to date through the month of December for fiscal 24. The table at the bottom is the BRE's sports wagering forecast. They're required to do this as part of their purview. And so you can see first what happened in fiscal 23. The revenue to the blueprint fund came in a little bit less than the BRE had expected. And then you can also see their revision to their forecast in December for both fiscal 24 and 25. You can see in the year to date for fiscal 24, there's been a fairly significant amount of wagering and therefore revenue. And so as a result, they raised their estimate of sports wagering revenue to the blueprint fund by about $10.5 million in fiscal 24, almost all of it coming out of the mobile side. The mobile side is far bigger than the retail sports wagering, as you can see. The impact in fiscal 25 is less. We don't have a lot of experience with sports wagering. I think the BRE is trying to be conservative about their forecast. So you end up with about $50 million going to the blueprint fund in fiscal 2025. Revenue from expired tickets goes to the problem gambling fund, and that's shown at the very bottom of that page 1. There's also a little bit of license fee revenue that goes to the small minority and women-owned businesses fund. They received about $500,000, I believe, in fiscal 2022 from those licensee fees. Turning to the page 2 and the casinos. We'll start with a little history. The graph on the right side of page 2 is the history of gross casino revenues going back to fiscal 2018. Fiscal 2018 was the first full year that the MGM casino was opened. Gross revenues in this case is the total wagered less prize payouts, and the dark bar is VLT revenue. The lighter bar is the table game revenue. Not surprisingly, revenues fell substantially in fiscal 2020. When the pandemic began, the casinos themselves were closed from mid-March into late June. Then revenues bounced back quite strongly in fiscal 21. In fact, so strongly for VLTs that they actually exceeded the revenue in fiscal 19 from before the pandemic, despite the fact that for part of that, they did operate under limited capacity in order to spread players out. Revenue grew again substantially in fiscal 22, up 15% for both table games and VLT revenues. And there was a little bit of growth in fiscal 23. The pace of growth has slowed. VLTs were up 1.2% in fiscal 23. Table game revenue was up 5.3%. So all in fiscal 23, we had $2.1 billion of gross revenue here. It's about 17% more than what we had in fiscal 19. And that, I think, was a somewhat surprising result. I went back and looked at the BRE forecast from December of 2019, and they had projected growth between fiscal 23 over fiscal 19 of just 4.8%. But the actual came in, as I said, at about a 17% increase. The table on the right-hand side of page 2 is the year-to-date revenue for fiscal 24. We have data through the month of September. Things do seem to be taking a step back here in terms of revenue. VLT revenues in total are down 2%, with every casino down except for a small increase at the live casino. Table game revenues are down 17%. This is a little bit exaggerated because in fiscal 23, MGM had one of the occasional big months for table game revenues. They did like over $70 million of revenue in the month of October. A typical month would be more in the $25 to $30 million range. So if you exclude MGM, the decline is about 6.8%. The decline at the education, obviously this flows through to the Education Trust Fund. That's where the casino money goes. And so you see a decline in Education Trust Fund revenue so far in fiscal 24 of about 5.7%, $18 million. There is a small increase in the share of revenues being retained by the Hollywood Casino. It goes up to from 39% to 42% between fiscal 23 and 24. There's also an increase in the share of the revenues being retained by the Horseshoe Casino, from 46% to 47%. This comes from legislation from the 2021 session that increased those shares. Page 3 is the BRE's forecast of the casino revenue. We'll start with the fiscal 23 closeout. VLT revenues came in ahead of estimate by 16 million. You can see how the revenues are distributed. The casinos retain a share, and then some money goes to the purse dedication account. That's 6%. Local impact grants are 5.5%. The small minority and women-owned business account is 1.5%. And both the racetrack renewal account and the lottery's expenditures are 1% of gross revenues. And then the remainder goes to the Education Trust Fund. On the table game side, though, in fiscal 23, revenues came in below expectation, but overall, the Education Trust Fund actually exceeded the estimate by about $3.8 million. The table also shows you the BRE's December revision to their casino forecast for fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. Given the declines we've seen year to date in fiscal 24, the BRE lowered their forecast for both VLT revenues and more substantially for the table game revenues. As a result, revenue to the Education Trust Fund was revised down by about $15 million in both fiscal 2024 and fiscal 2025. And turning to the other big source of gaming revenue, which is the lottery. On page 4, which I have lost. Again, we'll start with some history. The graph on the left-hand side is the year-over-year percent change in net lottery sales going back to fiscal 18. In this case, sales is the total played before any deductions for prize payouts or other administrative costs or the agent commission. And the dark bar here is the total. The light bar is excluding Mega Millions and Powerball. I took those out because those two games tend to be kind of volatile. They'll go up big when there are big jackpots, and otherwise they'll come back down. You can see that in fiscal 20, total net sales fell slightly, but if you take out Mega Millions and Powerball, sales were actually up 5%. That's because there were relatively few big jackpots in either game in fiscal 20. The opposite was true in fiscal 23. Total net sales were up 3.8%, but almost all the growth came from Mega Millions and Powerball. Mega Millions had 2 jackpots in fiscal 23 that exceeded $1 billion. Powerball had just 1, but it was also their all-time biggest jackpot, $1.9 billion. On the right-hand side of page 4 is the year-to-date performance through the month of December. Similarly to the casinos, we're seeing a step back here in revenues and sales. Total sales are down 1.3% year-to-date, with only the instant tickets have eked out a small 0.5% growth. Powerball is up Powerball has had 2 jackpots over $1 billion so far in fiscal 24, one in July and one in October. Net revenues here, net revenues is taking the net sales, subtracting out prize payouts, administrative costs, the agent commission. So it's the amount of money that will then get distributed to various places. That's only down 0.7%. So it's down less than the decline in net sales. And that's because prize payouts have been relatively low, especially in the pick 4 game, not only low relative to 23, but low relative to what one would expect given the odds of the game. So that's contributing to the decline in net revenues being less than the decline in sales. And then on my last page here, page 5, this is the forecast, and I wanted to show you the long-term forecast for the lottery. This is the VRE's December forecast for traditional lottery revenues. And I wanted to show the long-term because I think one thing to keep in mind is the growing use of the lottery revenue for a variety of other purposes. And by definition, meaning less lottery revenue to the general fund. Lottery used to be the 4th largest revenue source to the general fund. It's now the 5th. And you can see the distributions have become quite extensive. They're listed there at the bottom of that page. In total, distributions to other funds, which are projected to be about $40 million in fiscal 24, about 5.7% of total net revenues, rising to about $185 million by the time you get to fiscal 29, getting close to 30% of total net revenues. And as a result, general fund lottery revenues are projected to fall from $650 million in fiscal 24 down to $483 million in fiscal 2029. Last time general fund lottery revenues were in that range was fiscal 2017. Among the distributions, a lot of the new distributions are coming through programs run by the Stadium Authority. You probably are aware that the Stadium Authority and the lottery revenues were used when the baseball and football stadiums at Camden Yards were first built. The lottery was used to pay debt service. The very first line of the distribution detail, Stadium Authority, that's what that is. That's still debt service on those old bonds from the original building of the football and baseball stadiums. But it's obviously running down now. It'll be just $3 million by the time you get to fiscal 27. Among the new programs run through the Stadium Authority are, of course, first and largest, the redevelopment of both the baseball and football stadium. There's also a program in the Stadium Authority to develop a non-major league sports entertainment facility somewhere in the state. And to use the Stadium Authority is also working on development for the Blue Line Corridor in Prince George's County. And the other major new distribution is for something that the lottery hasn't really been used for in the past, which is to fund transportation. In this case, the Bus Rapid Transit Fund within the Department of Transportation and the Transportation Trust Fund. And the purpose of the Bus Rapid Transit Fund is to provide grants to localities for a bus rapid transit systems, and that will be about $27 million going forward. And then there's a variety of other smaller distributions. And that was all I had, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for our list? I don't know if you can do this or not, and with any ease, and I don't think anybody else is probably going to do it, but can you give a little history on sort of the varied component of the difference between the casinos in which which parts come back to the state? Can you do that? Or you know what I'm talking about?
In terms of the
they have different rates.
Oh, the different rates. Yeah, I actually do have that information. If you'll just give me a second.
Just for some of the newer members of the committee to know that how that
my myriad.
There's some old history on that.
It ranges from about 42%. Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
we're talking about the tax rates.
Yeah. The ETF gets about 43% of the total revenues from the Hollywood Casino, 41% at MGM, 32% from Ocean Downs, 36% from Live, and 38% from Horseshoe, and 27% from Rocky Gap. On the table game side, the ETF gets 15%. of the total gross revenues, with the casino retaining 80% and the local impact grants getting 5%.
So a lot of the reason for the difference had to do with when they came online, what influence they may have had on other casinos that existed already. And so there was a fair amount of difference between them. It's kind of, I don't know if it's unique in other states, but it's certainly adds to sort of a little bit of complication in thinking about all this stuff, because it's not the same. But there were reasons behind it all as it was done. The other thing I wanted to point out, because I think it's interesting, it has to do with some of the lottery games, as we all think about Powerball and Mega Millions a lot. But for instance, racetrack, I don't even know if people who, if everybody's played in the bars or in some of the retail facilities, some of these games, but they're pretty significant in the overall amounts. I mean, double that of Mega Millions and Powerball, roughly. Just an interesting thing that some of these other games, because the Keno, of course, most people have heard of that, but I don't know if people who were paying attention to that, and even the smaller games that are bringing a lot of revenue, the pick 3s, 4s, and 5s. Any questions? No. Senator Hellman?
Chairman, I wonder if you can tell me our spread of revenue generation across lottery and casinos. Is it different from other states? Do you know? And mobile?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I have to look into that.
Okay. Just curious if there's a lot of variation, because honestly, I was sort of really surprised to see how much money was generated via the lottery and in comparison to other forms of gambling. So
the lottery has been around a long
long
time.
time.
It
Right,
started
right.
in the 1970s.
Right. So I agree, but also like everybody knows, I think, like pretty much everybody knows their casinos and pretty much everybody knows their sports betting. So I'm just sort of curious about that spread.
Yeah, it may be, as the chairman pointed out, we pay attention to the lottery when those sort of big jackpots happen. Otherwise, it just sort of is percolating in the background. But it does generate a lot of revenue.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we've got a panel coming up now about the Joint Chairman's report on internet gaming. Mr. Martin, you gonna run this thing?
Into the ground.
There we go.
Hey, you're very good. Thank you. Mr. Martin, are you doing this solo or you got a team coming up?
Brian Wyman probably should sit here with me
Okay,
at the time.
okay.
Um, Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, John Martin, Director, Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency. Be more than happy to spend a couple minutes here and thank Teresa again for her excellent overview of some of the revenue numbers. What I'd like to do is just based on some of the questions that we just heard, give you a little perspective. We are in three primary businesses. You already heard Teresa identify them. And as you saw previously, we have 12 games in the marketplace. And as the chair pointed out, a number of these games do significantly more than Mega Millions and Powerball, even though we hear Mega Millions and Powerball in the media. Our fiscal 23 sales, $2.7 billion. Over $714 million in profit, over 651 of that towards the general fund. We also have a similar retail business or a lottery business called Instant Ticket Lottery Machine, which is a program that was launched in September of 2014 to benefit veterans services organizations. Some of you who may be veterans or visited a veterans post may have seen these machines. They look a lot like slot machines, but they are exclusive to the veterans organizations. Since the program began in 2014, nearly $44 million in total profits to the veterans. Casinos, as we saw previously from Teresa, we have 6 of them around the state. Last year, fiscal 23, the casino gaming revenue was over $2 billion. The contributions to the state over $848 million in fiscal 23. Of that, $622 million was to the Education Trust Fund. You heard a very brief overview on sports wagering, our most recent participant in our portfolio. Our role for both the casinos and sports wagering is that as regulator. We operate the lottery, but we regulate the casinos and sports wagering. And within the state of Maryland today, we have 13 retail, 12 mobile, 25 total sports books throughout the state. Our fiscal 23 contributions to the blueprint, a little over 25 million. We are on track to nearly double that by the end of this fiscal year. So it has been a growth area in terms of revenue contribution. We have a number of ancillary responsibilities, all regulatory, but they do round out the portfolio. We have skills-based amusement devices, everything from the claw machines you see in Ocean City and machines like that throughout the state. We also regulate 13 facilities in the bingo hall space. With the sports wagering legislation, we picked up regulatory function for fantasy competitions, and we collect tax revenues from fantasy participants on a quarterly basis. And one of the areas we're very proud of, our voluntary exclusion program and our coordinated effort with a number of other state agencies to work with and establish responsible gaming practices and support services for those people who may need that assistance. I think it's important before I turn it over to Brian that we clarify the terms both internet or iLottery and iGaming, because I think there's potential to confuse and conflate the two. They are two very, very different audiences. When I talk about iLottery, I'm talking about all of the traditional lottery games that I just shared with you a few moments ago, playing those on a mobile device. So the ability to purchase Powerball, Mega Millions, Pick 3, Pick 4, scratch-off games, whatever traditional lottery games are, but now available from a mobile device. Our role in the iLottery marketplace would be to manage and market the games just as we do the traditional lottery games. To share with you briefly by example what the future could look like, and I should also identify the fact that we don't get to iLottery until there's a repeal of the existing prohibition. So without legislative action during this session to repeal the existing prohibition on iLottery, then this doesn't advance. But should that be the case, should the repeal go through, we would hope to work with all stakeholders and engage in a dialogue to develop and flesh out an iLottery ecosystem, for lack of a better term. And that would begin with a further analysis of the landscape. Who's currently in the iLottery marketplace? There are 12 jurisdictions who do have an iLottery product. Who's the target audience? Who's apt to purchase iLottery games? Demographically, we know it skews to a younger player. We know their buying behaviors and their preferences to conduct all aspects of their life via a phone, via a mobile device. We would anticipate collaborating with retailers to engage both the brick and mortar locations with the iLottery platform, where we can continue to promote and direct players from an iLottery platform back to retail. In jurisdictions who have collaborated successfully, they're able to see gains in both traditional lottery and iLottery sales. If they're able to successfully develop those programs, that would be a potential goal of ours as well. And putting the proper player protections in place. I know later on this afternoon, you're going to hear from some of the folks from the Center of Excellence. They're great partners of ours. We share their belief in looking at ways to protect and mitigate harms from vulnerable populations. So putting in place controls and mechanisms to make sure the player is of age, legally in Maryland at the time to participate, whether it be iLottery or iGaming. The player protections tend to cross over to both segments. And then what's the revenue impact? I'm working up with our friends at DLS. I'm sure we can come up with some forecasted numbers that would be a net gain, net new revenue to the state for future years. And then ultimately, again, increasing both sales at retail as well as in the iLottery platform. So the takeaway here from iLottery is it is taking our traditional lottery games and putting them on a mobile device. That compares to iGaming. iGaming is taking any game you see currently in a casino, craps, roulette, blackjack, poker, and putting those games on a mobile device. Our role in that environment is significantly different, just as it is in the casino business. We would be regulating the iGaming platform. We would be licensing operators who would then provide iGaming services via the mobile technology. And as part of the charge here, and the reason that Brian's sitting next to me is that we were fortunate enough to work with, based on your directive from last year, the Innovation Group, a Las Vegas-based firm who specializes in understanding the marketplace. And with us today is Brian Wyman to take you through the iGaming report that hopefully many of you have already seen, and to be available for any questions you may have. Brian?
Thank you. For the record, Brian Wyman, Executive Vice President of the Innovation Group. Thank you for the invitation to appear today and for any questions that come along the way. I'm here to summarize the findings of our report that we've worked with Maryland Lottery and Gaming on over the last several months. And again, more than happy to take questions or be told to speed up, slow down as we proceed through. I gave a similar, if not identical, briefing to House Ways and Means last week. My slides in and of themselves took about between 20 and 25 minutes to go through. If that's suitable to everyone, I'll proceed. Thank you. We were tasked with answering some very specific questions about iGaming. To be clear, my firm has worked in gaming and hospitality as an advisor, primarily answering economic questions for the last 30 years. We have a large division focused on land-based development and a smaller division that's burgeoning now focused on sports betting and iGaming. The tasks that we were asked to address were to provide an estimate of the market size for iGaming in Maryland. And again, if I say iGaming, interactive gaming, internet gaming, or online gaming, I mean the same thing, which is casino style games on a mobile phone, tablet, computer, those types of things. So establish the market size for iGaming in Maryland, provide insight into the iGaming market size in other states. There are currently 6 states with iGaming launched, and one that's passed and waiting to launch. Third, to estimate the iGaming impact on casino gaming revenue, followed by task 4, the impact on other gaming revenue, so non-casino gaming revenue. Take a look at what I'll say is best practices is kind of how it was delivered to me on implementation in other states. So should a bill be passed, what considerations might be taken in deciding the kind of major decision points within such a bill. Pros and cons of casino partnerships with online gaming companies. There are many, you know of them well through sports betting, which is already operating in Maryland. So FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM. I won't go through the whole list, but the idea is that oftentimes a casino is granted a license for some sort of internet gaming, again, whether it's poker or casino or sports, and then they partner with a company that specializes in offering those products as a sub-license arrangement. Taking a look at multi-jurisdictional gaming agreements. So this is primarily poker related. We'll get to that in a few slides. Estimating the size of the illegal gaming market, the illegal iGaming market in the state of Maryland. And then the last two tasks are consumer protections and responsible gaming, which we worked with the Maryland COE on problem gaming to address. And we've got about one slide for each of these. Some will go quicker than others. As for the overall market estimate, we looked at states that offer iGaming, the rates at which they grew, and really the per capita revenues in those states to make them comparable to Maryland. And in the end, based on our analysis, and when I say per capita throughout this presentation, I mean per capita of legal gambling age. So 21 plus is what we use in all of these jurisdictions. So yeah, on a spend per capita basis, we arrive at a stabilized roughly 2030 number of just over 900 million in iGaming revenue in the state of Maryland. Okay, sorry, and that compares to the table on this slide shares iGaming revenue by year for some of the states that have launched. As you can see, Pennsylvania and Michigan, even though they've only launched a couple of years ago, are well into the billions of dollars in iGaming revenue. Pennsylvania at around 1.4, Michigan around 1.6. New Jersey's still the leader at 1.6, but they've had a several year head start launching in 2013. West Virginia is growing, and Connecticut just recently launched. Delaware has had, besides having a low population, they have a very low revenue per capita. And there's many reasons for that I don't think we'll dive into here, but Delaware is not really an appropriate comp for the market that you're looking to foster here should you decide to pass a bill. The third task we were asked again, what is the iGaming impact on Maryland gaming revenue or casino gaming revenue? And this is really, and I apologize, I think I've got a chart overlapping some text here. This is really going to drive what I'll talk about on the next slide as well, which is a labor impact. What we did was we took a look at states that have launched iGaming and states that have not launched iGaming, and we did a revenue comparison in those states from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, and several of the states launched iGaming during the pandemic. And so in an effort to try to capture the effect on gaming revenue. We know with the inflation numbers what they were, that we expected to see gaming revenues rise post-pandemic, and generally we did. But when we netted out population growth and GDP growth in those states and compared the with iGaming to without iGaming states, we got a net impact of about 10%. So we saw, excuse me, non-iGaming states grow at about 8%, net of, again, population and GDP growth. And iGaming states grew their casino land-based revenue at about -2%. So that nets to about a 10% impact. I think there's a reasonable argument that this is modestly overstated. And the rationale there is that, several of the states that did not launch iGaming are in the Deep South, and their attitudes toward reopening casinos post-pandemic, both from a participant side and a casino and legislative or regulatory side, was very different than what we saw in the Northeast. Again, both in the timing of reopenings and in terms of willingness of populations to get out and participate. And so that could be driving a little bit of this. iGaming is primarily a Northeast thing at this point. But again, netting out population and GDP, we get about a 10% differential between those growths. And so we would expect some cannibalization is the upshot here of casino revenue if iGaming were implemented. Now, based on a $2 billion land-based casino market, that translates to about a $200 million loss in casino revenue versus a $900 million upside forecast for iGaming, which for you will all, get to what's the appropriate tax rate and so on and so forth. We took exactly the same approach. If I can get this to change slides. There we go. Okay, so sorry. So between the end of the report and today, I was asked to comment on how this reduction in gaming revenue would impact labor. What I can say is that a gaming revenue reduction will impact labor. Casinos are structured very differently from casino to casino, but all the casinos have fixed and variable labor. You only need one general manager, but you need one general manager regardless of the revenue. That's not the case with beverage servers, for example, and casino dealers. So should there be a reduction in gaming revenue, we would expect in certain positions throughout the casino resort to see a reduction in labor. We won't see reductions, for example, in hotel, likely, because casinos can use comps to fill those hotel rooms, and they will do that. They're incentivized to do that, to bring in gaming guests to fill the hotel rooms. So we're likely to not see a reduction in hotel occupancy. So I wouldn't expect, for example, a reduction in housekeeping. I wouldn't expect a reduction at front desk. I would expect a reduction in slot attendants, dealers, beverage servers, and food and beverage outlet servers if visitation to the property were to decline, which we would expect with a reduction in revenue. Our estimate at the end of the day is that this could be at an individual property anywhere from about 4% labor reduction to about an 8% labor reduction, and blended across the various property types, somewhere in the middle. What I will say, and this came up the other day in the House, is that Las Vegas itself, where I live, was threatened by the really proliferation of regional gaming throughout the country. And what we saw in Las Vegas was a pivot from more pure gaming properties to really leveraging the fact that the companies that operate these properties, by and large, are more than casino companies. They're entertainment and resort companies. And we saw really we see now even still a burgeoning non-gaming revenue in Las Vegas. So they've sort of pivoted their business model based on the revenue loss. That may impact the jobs in a positive way as a mitigating factor, but we've not quantified that at all here in Maryland. The only other mitigating piece I'd mention is that look, iGaming, an introduction of iGaming into a casino environment, i.e., one of your casinos gets an iGaming license, they're going to hire one or two people to run iGaming at the property. This is not a big labor force boon. However, if one of the things that's offered now pretty commonly in mobile casino gaming is live dealer gaming. So for example, if you're playing blackjack, it feels different to a player to see electronic cards show up kind of out of thin air versus seeing a video of a physical dealer dealing cards onto a table out of a deck, watching shuffle happen, those kind of things. It's a different experience for the consumer. So it's very popular now. And that has the impact of partial mitigation of some of the labor impact because there will be production jobs associated with the videography. There will be dealer jobs associated with that. So I wanted to share that there's a modest mitigation, but I would still expect a negative labor impact as a result of this. Great. So on this slide, I share this is intended to share the approach that we took to measure the iGaming impact. We took the 6 states that offer it. We compared their 2019 to 2022 casino land-based GGRs, looked at their growth rate, looked at their population and GDP growth, netted those out, and came to an average. And in the iGaming states that you're looking at here, we had a minus 8.2%, again, net of population and GDP growth. Now, in the iGaming states, we saw a plus 2%. And again, that was the net of minus 10.2. When we looked at this effect on lottery, we saw effectively 0. Like rather than a plus, we saw 0 net between them. I think it was less than 1/10 of a point difference. So we concluded that there was no impact on lottery. This slide is to share iGaming implementation decisions in other states. As part of this, you know, our goal when we wrote this report was not to be making policy recommendations. It was to be really sharing information about how iGaming is implemented in other states, what we see from an economic perspective, what the decision points in a bill are, and how you might think about the pros and cons of each of those decision points. What we did do as part of this exercise was to interview, I think it was roughly 30 stakeholders. I could be wrong about the number, but we interviewed roughly 30 stakeholders in the state, including the casinos, including several online operators, including the legislation in other states, just to try to get, again, best practices, pros, cons, and so on and so forth. Almost across the board, the folks that we spoke with, and again, take it with a grain of salt if it comes from the casinos, less so if it comes from legislators in other states. But they believed that key aspects of the bill would be licenses tethered to existing brick and mortar casino licenses. This is primarily for compliance reasons. You know, the casinos already deal with all of the compliance matters that would come up in iGaming. They're kind of a natural fit for this. A reasonable tax rate. If you ask 10 people, you'll get them to say 10 different tax rates. And I have a slide that we'll talk about in a minute on tax rate. You know, I shared with the committee last week that, you know, our view on tax rate is like, you almost want iGaming tax to be higher than land-based casino tax because you don't want to give the casinos incentive to shift players away from the casino where there are jobs where they've invested heavily in infrastructure into the online environment. The tension on the other side here is that you need to allow the iGaming operators the ability to market. First of all, the technology is not inexpensive. And second of all, you have to allow them the ability to market so that you can actually pull back players that are right now in the black market. And again, we'll talk about black market numbers in a minute. But yeah, so it's really a mixed bag. And if your land-based casino tax rate were 15%, I think we could come up with a nice middle ground tax rate that I would feel comfortable recommending. Given that your land-based casino tax rate is already in the 40s, we're kind of up against it in terms of, where that tax rate could go. It's difficult to recommend it lower. It's difficult to recommend it much higher. So we're sort of pigeonholed here. Of course, everybody we talked to emphasized responsible gaming. We're seeing numbers out of New Jersey now that suggest that our historical estimates of of problem gaming propensity in an online gaming environment may be low. And so we're going to really have to think hard as iGaming kind of emerges as to appropriate mitigation. And I know that the Center of Excellence is coming behind me. And so I think that they'll have a lot of thoughts about that, but also good gaming board oversight. So, not having folks that have never regulated gaming regulate iGaming. In this case, you have a lottery that sometimes the question is, should the lottery do it or should the casino regulator do it, or, that kind of thing. And in this case, you have a lottery that is the casino regulator. So that's a natural fit for regulation. We'll talk about skins in just a moment. All right, thank you. One of the questions that we asked stakeholders, and we can opine on as well, is who should receive licenses. Again, they emphasized that they thought casinos were the natural master license holders here. The state has made decisions with regard to sports betting licenses. And based on your experience, you can make a decision about that going forward. But the folks that we spoke with in the state felt that, casinos were the natural holders of these licenses. One of the things that the casinos emphasized really about why they should be the license holders, besides the compliance ease, was that they have these host community revenue share agreements. And in order to fulfill those in a declining market from a slot revenue perspective, they will need to take advantage of some of the benefits associated with iGaming. Skin, we use the word skins colloquially in the industry, but it really just means sub-license. And in various states, folks have different numbers of skins per master license holder. So the idea would be you have a casino that has a master iGaming license, and then they might have 2 or 3 skins or sub licenses associated with that license that they can use to bring brands into the state to offer iGaming under their master license. So you could have a casino that, MGM could on one hand offer BetMGM's online casino, and then they could either bring another MGM brand into the state, or they could partner with a casino like DraftKings, FanDuel, or another to bring that online casino into the state. So that's kind of this skins concept. And it really gets to how many online casino brands do you want to see in the state? Different states have made different choices. New Jersey has 5 per license. West Virginia has 3 per license. Michigan 2. This is a policy decision. When we look at states with many skins, we see that almost all of the revenue, the market share, ends up in 8 to 10 operators. So whether you're in a 2 or a 3 skin environment here, 12 or 18 operators in the state, I think that's very reasonable. 6, if you only had 1 skin, and I'm just assuming here that we start with master licenses at the casino, which I recognize is not a given. 6 is workable. I think it's probably too few. This is just my professional opinion. In the sense that you'll have 6 good operators in the state, they'll kind of establish themselves, and there'll be no room for anybody else to ever enter, either with an innovative product or something competitive. So just my view here.
So could you talk a minute about the value of those skins? Who owns the value of it? How that's handled sort of in the marketplace?
Yeah, when you say the value of the skins, I guess I could answer this two ways. It's you know, one is these skins are saleable. And so at some level, the skin is an opportunity to sell market access to a third party, again, like a DraftKings or a FanDuel that doesn't operate the physical casino, but operates an online one. And so oftentimes what happens is the master license holder, which again, I'm presuming is a casino for our discussion, but I don't want to take that for granted, will partner with a third party that offers online gaming as its primary business. And so that can, those commercial agreements range pretty dramatically. Taken at face value, the operator, the master license holder gets a small portion of net gaming revenues back to them as a revenue share. But when you follow the business all the way down to profit, that can range anything from 50-50 to 75-25, something along those lines.
So in granting these licenses, we just pick a number and then the value is established in the marketplace, and the value really isn't, there isn't a direct value to the state, but it's the value of what is generated from their efforts.
Well, I guess it's certainly the value to the state is certainly realized in tax revenues. So that's one portion of it. But the state also realizes value in terms of license fees, both from the master license holder and from the sub license holders. And that's, again, a decision that you all can make as to how, New York has had operators bid on the tax rate as an approach to establishing a market sports betting tax rate. So I think depending on how, listen, at the end of the day, the operators are going to make a decision to enter the market or not based on their own economics. And so I think the combination of tax rate and license fees is what's going to drive their decision. And so I think based on the amount of revenue available, there's room for the state to benefit from a reasonable license fee as well.
Yeah, please.
I'm sort of in the same place the chairman was in terms of trying to understand how the value flows, but I kind of lost it before that in terms of what the value proposition is for the state for having the master licenses as opposed to going directly to the skins.
Oh, as opposed to the state just issuing iGaming licenses directly through for example,
Yeah, or have the companies bid on them or whatever. I mean, what's the advantage of the state of having that second level? I missed that somehow.
And to be clear, that model exists in sports betting. Tennessee, for example, doesn't even have casinos. They issued licenses directly to sports betting companies. So I'm certainly not saying it is or isn't a workable model. I think that the decision here is, and I think the way it's discussed often in other states is taking a look at the casinos who are, likely to be cannibalized in this process. And as, major investors in infrastructure, as job creators, I think their view as an industry would be that they should have,
I can see what's in it for them. I'm asking it what's in it for us.
for the state.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a reasonable question. I think if you were to I think if you were to bid the licenses out directly, New York ended up at 51% on sports betting, bidding the licenses directly. And so I think there's not I don't know where you'll land on a tax rate if you were to give the master licenses to the casinos and let them work with the sub licensees versus having the licenses held at the state level. But I don't think the tax differential will end up, being enormous there. So I'm not sure that there's a tremendous benefit to doing it one way or the other.
Well, why did New York's end up at 51?
It was a bidding process.
No, I understand the bidding
Oh.
process, but what about the marketplace? The bidding process ended, in your view, ended up at that level?
I think based on the amount of investment that companies had to make in marketing to gain significant share in the New York market, that's where they landed. I also think they probably had some guidance from legislators that we want at least this much. So candidly, I think that's probably how they landed in that 50-51% range. I also think, however, that some of the operators were able to justify that high of a tax rate given the marketing spend because they were already spending large amounts of advertising revenue in the New York market.
Gotcha.
By virtue of them already being live in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
And so I think there's some synergy there that they were like, okay, we can still squeeze out a little bit of profit even at 51%. But I think if you kind of break down their business model, you're almost up against a wall at that number in terms of them having a margin left over.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Director Martin and Executive Vice President Wyman for the information. I'm gonna take you back a couple tasks, so I'm gonna double back to task 3. First, I'm glad that whoever decided to talk about the workforce added that piece to the presentation, because that's what I've been getting many emails about, some of the text messages that I get about from the op-eds that have been written and things of that nature. So I just want to dig into that a little bit. You talked about the impact and like the percentage loss of some of the other states. I would like to hear in your research if there were any supplemental opportunities that maybe the folks that did it on the front end might not have gotten right, but some of the folks that are currently doing it maybe this past year, 2 years, may have done something or structured it different from that standpoint. And if you could, and I do see that you got mitigation in here, but I just wanted to see if there were any other supplemental mitigation opportunities from that standpoint. You also talked about like how this impacts our restaurants. You talked about how this impacts our hotels, but like those other indirect economic impacts, like in our urban jurisdiction, we just got Top Golf, we just got the Warner, like some of these stadiums and things of that nature. Can you just dig into that a little bit about like the other indirect economic impacts that may not be the casino specifically, but still is going to be impacted by this change if it happens?
Sure, and thank you for the questions. I guess I'll take them in 2 parts. First, yeah, I don't know that states that are rolling out iGaming today are doing enough differently that we have learnings yet from them. I will say that, many of the states that launched iGaming did so during the middle of the pandemic. When we came back out of the pandemic and started reopening, staffing was a major problem for casinos across the country. And so if you look at labor numbers at casinos post-pandemic, they are largely deflated. Okay. There are many jobs that casinos couldn't fill, bonuses, whatever, like they couldn't hire dealers, couldn't hire servers. And only now are we starting to see some of those jobs being filled. So I think looking at job numbers in 2021, 2022 doesn't tell a story of, job loss due to iGaming. I think there were multiple factors in there. So estimating that job loss is quite difficult. Again, we did so, by the way, just using our internal staffing models, and most places that operate they have to report their margins to Wall Street. And so they're very sensitive to those margins. And so they have staffing models that are based on metrics. So if you want to know how many slot attendants or how many cocktail servers will be on the floor, all you need to know is how much gaming revenue do we expect to do today? And there's a formula that'll translate from one down to the number of folks in those positions. And so naturally, if they're managing their labor that way, if revenue declines, so too will labor. And so I think I've probably answered something close to your first question, but not quite. Maybe the answer was just no. The second question you asked about areas adjacent to the casino that might be impacted, I think, by reduction in casino visitation. Two-part answer, I guess, or maybe it's two sides of the same coin. There are many non-gaming opportunities today at casino resorts across the country, and that selection is expanding. Whether it's retail outlets, Topgolf, something experiential, either a full Topgolf or even these small Topgolf swing suites that have a bar and a simulator inside. We see, again, restaurants, whether they're branded third party or owned by the casino. We see bars, distilleries, breweries. We see entertainment centers, meeting and convention halls, arenas for shows. And why I say that it's a two-sided coin is because on one hand, reduction in gaming revenue and reduction in visitation to the property suggests that those businesses will be impacted. On the other hand, as casinos develop more and more of those, they move from being a slot hall to being a true, destination. And so what we are seeing, and this is top of mind for a lot of operators today, is they want to pull in new audiences, not necessarily to spend money primarily on the gaming floor, but they do so by creating these environments that have, the ability to spend a weekend. I tell people, like, my wife doesn't gamble. And so going to a casino hotel with her for a weekend, the place has to have, a wide range of amenities, spa, restaurants, entertainment. And if it does, then you start to diversify those revenues and it becomes not just about the casino floor. So I think on one hand, yes, those businesses are impacted. On the other hand, you'll see more of a focus on those businesses as casino revenues decline.
Close out by saying just thank you, Mr. Chair. Look forward to further dialogue about this subject because this is what's hitting my inbox and hitting a lot of the communications that I'm having.
Thank you. Following up a little bit on my friend from Baltimore City's questions, we talk about impact. Mine's more going back to just the actual impact itself. When we talk about like the brick and mortars, the report estimated about a 10% impact. Previously, the other report was given when we talk about the mobile sports betting. In fiscal 2023, we saw retail had 246 million. This year for 6 months, it's 100. So you extrapolate to 200 million. You're talking about a 20% change. So what if we lost 20% in sports gaming that we know about? How do you fall on the 10%? Don't you think it's a little conservative? I mean, I think it's gonna be a higher number than that.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. And I actually am surprised that it's 20%. I would have expected an awful lot more of a decline in retail sports betting with the introduction of mobile sports betting. And when we look at sports betting across the country, the split between mobile and retail is often in excess of 90% mobile. And there's a huge difference between sports betting and other casino games in the experience. Sports betting is incredibly transactional. Okay, so like most players would prefer to know the line, say, I want to bet that line, bet it, and then they watch the game on their couch, they watch the game at their friend's house, they watch the game at the bar. Driving to the casino to make the bet runs the risk of the line moving before you get there. You have to wait in line to make the bet. You have to return to the casino to cash the ticket, and you're stuck in the casino maybe that's not where you want to watch the game. You have to drive however far back to your friends or whatever. So it's very, very convenient without any loss of experience to do sports betting on a mobile device versus casino, where I don't know how many of you visit casinos, but holding the dice in your hands is a lot different than pushing the button on your phone and seeing virtual dice roll down, your iPhone. And so, and again, we haven't seen catastrophic losses. Catastrophic meaning far in excess of 10%, empirically in other states. And we wouldn't expect that, again, based on the experiential difference between, casino and sports betting. Sports betting is also something that takes seconds to execute, whereas a gaming, a gaming session is often several hours. And so the investment in driving 30 minutes to a casino is far less on a relative basis if you're going to play slots for 2-3 hours than it is to make one transaction at the sports betting window.
One more thing, you mentioned about 10% is generally what you saw, but wasn't Indiana's much higher than that?
Indiana hasn't launched iGaming.
Or what you projected for Indiana or no?
We, as far as I know, we don't have any projections out for Indiana. There may be another firm that reported in Indiana.
Okay, I thought I read somewhere they were projected about a 30% loss. So if you're not familiar with that, that's okay.
It would be, yeah, I don't. Indiana's 30% loss, if that's projected, I'm sure that projection is not solely based on iGaming because, yeah.
So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin, I wonder, actually, I'd be interested in hearing from each of you, but Mr. Martin specifically, if you could, and I know we're going to hear from the Center of Excellence in a little while, but we have the experience of other states moving to this kind of expansion and the increase in problem gambling, such that in Pennsylvania, like over 30% of people had experienced problems in their, I don't want to necessarily say addiction, but we know that there's a prevalence when we expand. So I just wanted to know if you could respond to kind of what your agency is prepared to do in the face, if we went down this road, kind of in the face of that consequence.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to respond to that, Senator. We are very proud of the work we've done historically in responsible gaming. We, over the last several years, have worked to recertify ourselves to a standard set by both the World Lottery Association and the National Council on Problem Gambling. So we're proud of the work we've done, and that really embraces a number of factors. It embraces the design in the products, so that before we even go to market, they're designed to not take advantage of vulnerable populations or to appeal to underage players in any way. We promote heavily resources available via 800 numbers that I'm sure the folks at the Center of Excellence will talk further about. We do a lot in terms of working with the support community. We have a group called the MARG, the Maryland Alliance for Responsible Gaming, that we participate in. So we continue to look at player protections going in, making sure and promote standard best practices, set a limit, set a time, play in a social setting, have a plan, stick with it, understand the odds of the game. So there's a number of practices that we put in place to help address that. And we continue to look and work with contemporary resources to make sure we continue to be best of class in that.
And do you roll that out contemporaneously with a new form?
Oh, absolutely. For instance, sports wagering, and it would be the same in iGaming. We make sure, since we regulate these industries, that the ultimate onus is on the operator themselves. So they have to provide to us their responsible gaming plan before they're issued a license. That did that in sports wagering. And we'd do the same thing were we to regulate iGaming. So it's a collaborative effort, both with the operator and with us as regulators and with people like the Center of Excellence. So there are a lot of people who participate in that.
And do you feel like you have enough resources to be able to adequately address the need might be there?
Well, I think, and I don't want to take their presentation. There's always a need for more resources, but I think there's always going to be a need for education and hopefully doing what we can to address that.
Thank you. Thank you.
A quick, hopefully it's a quick, just factual question. For either of you, do we know what percentage of Maryland adults, I'll say, are gambling in any of these, from the lottery to sports betting to everything else? Do we have any sense of percentage of Marylanders who are participating in some way in our gambling industry?
Yes, we do, Senator. We on a timely basis go out into the marketplace and survey and do these results. And the most recent results, don't have it in front of me, so bear with me here, but it's well over 70 to 80% of Marylanders do engage in some level of gaming, whether that's lottery tickets, whether it's casinos, horses, I mean, whatever the gaming is. So it's well in excess of probably 80% plus at this point who do engage in it.
In any of the regulated areas? That doesn't count the black market?
Correct. I mean, we're only measuring the regulated
Okay,
area.
thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you for the information, but I have one concern, and that's how we manage minors. We can manage them at the door when they come in, and we can do that wisely by identification or just in that way. But how do we better manage them in this sense and making sure that they are 18 or older? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think that ID verification is really state of the art at this point. And so I worry less about fake IDs and things like that, giving people access to gaming on their mobile phone, than I do about a parent having an online casino installed on a tablet device at home and, sort of being lax about allowing an 18, 19, 17-year-old access to that, right, which is clearly inappropriate. I think, again, the tension here is, do you make someone authenticate with their face every time they want to do this, or with a physical ID, which is costly also, every time they want to do this? Or, do you allow for adults to manage that on their phone? I mean, I think the establishment of an account at an online gaming, regulated online gaming service has adequate protections to ensure that the person registering is of legal age. Once that account is established, then I share your concern and think it's again a matter of how heavily we want to make someone verify every single time that they're doing that.
But I still have a concern because I see minors being very smart with devices. They're very smart. They are. And that's one of the problems I believe I would have, because knowing that how they can get my phone and I have a problem with it, and a 12-year-old can just, there you go. And I see it all the time. So knowing that an adult has an account doesn't mean a minor cannot go in there in that device and do it. And that's why I say that that concern is there, to knowing a minor could do something like that. And I think having the proper way that you can make sure that the identification is there for that adult is important, and making sure that a minor doesn't be a part of that. And it's just concerning though, but I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, we certainly can talk about multi-factor authentication, and there are ways to help ensure that it is an adult without, again, making them go through the process of scanning an ID every single time they want to log into their app, which would be cumbersome and would certainly affect our market size estimates, right? But there are, other industries, that face this same challenge. I mean, as an adult, I can buy a gun and keep it in my house, and I have the same concern that my child could access it, right? And so
There's devices for that, which I think people use wisely when they're use that wisdom in their house to do the right thing. I'm just concerned about that sense, that I just want to make sure we have the right things that are out there to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's all.
yeah, and I think with a phone we have those And it's a matter of, how well an adult controls the child's access to the physical device that contains the casino, and whether it's password protecting or facial recognition or whatever. I think there's an onus on the adult to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. And Mr. Wyman, you mentioned the impact on labor, just to follow up a little bit on Senator McCray, 4 to 8%. But Mr. Martin, you did not indicate an impact on labor on the iLottery side.
That's correct. We have not done that type of analysis.
Thank you very much. So I just had a quick question. I hope it's quick. So with go to a casino, you go to an ATM, you take out cash, right? You go in a game, you go to a table, put down cash. You're kind of keeping track of how much you're winning and most of the time, losing. But with iGaming, you'd be using your credit card or debit card, right? And it's electronic, right? So it's on your phone. Is there a daily limit in terms of how much someone can bet a day?
Yeah, thanks for the question. My understanding is that these applications allow for consumers to set such limits. I mean, banks and ATMs set such limits in the casino, and banks may have different policies about funding things related to online gaming. And I'm not prepared to speak to individual bank policies on that, but consumers are able to do that within the application.
If I may, Senator, we have that practice today with sports wagering. When someone goes and establishes a sports wagering account, they've got a digital wallet an account, and then there are protections that they can choose to apply to give them daily limits. But ultimately it's the operator and the player who share that responsibility.
Yeah, and I certainly know a little bit about sports betting, and you have to wait a little bit until you can get the money when Lamar Jackson scores a touchdown. But with with iGaming, it's pretty quick compared to how sports betting is in terms of. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Question, Mr. Martin, I apologize. In regards to the iLottery, you talked about earlier about the iLottery marketplace. I want to kind of stand that against kind of our traditional retail lottery marketplace. So, and if you don't have the information now, maybe you could get it to the committee, might be helpful. But how many lottery agents do we have statewide? Where are they located? Geographies, all that kind of stuff. Because in essence, they're small businesses, and they're already facing, a cut in the current budget with as far as some of the payouts, and this will obviously would reduce probably some of their revenue. So if you can provide us that informational, statewide, where they're located, things of that nature, I think that would be very helpful.
Sure. We have 4,400 lottery retailers around the state, and about 70% of them are mom and pop small businesses. About 30% are corporate owned entities. They're just about in every place, every corner of the state. And I'm sure many of you have them in your locations and have visited them once or twice on occasion: convenience stores, grocery stores, liquor stores, everything in between. So yeah, that's pretty much, and that's been a solid number for the last several years, about 4,400 entities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just a little surprised that you all have not taken a look at the impact that it would have on the workers, on labor. That's a little worrisome for me. I would think that would be something that you all would be interested in knowing as it pertains to the labor force. And the second thing is, what you're talking about here is a 24/7. Is that correct?
Sure.
Is that 24/7?
Sure. Anything online would be 24/7.
If it's online, so does it have any limit as to the age of the individual who wishes to play?
Well, again, a lottery product, the age is 18, just as is in store, and for a iGaming product, it would be 21, just as it is in a casino.
Mhm. So if you're talking about online betting and you have youngsters who have access to computers and to iPhones and all these other gadgets, could they possibly participate at 2:00 in the morning?
Well, the way the system is set up, Senator, or would be set up, first of all, let me address your labor issue. The reason we haven't looked at labor on the iLottery side yet is that we don't have a path to do that yet. The action in front of the assembly this session, if they choose to, would be to repeal the existing prohibition. Once that would be repealed, we would then entertain a conversation with all stakeholders, and labor would be a big part of that. So I didn't want to get the cart out before the horse here. But since you brought up the concept of 24/7 and access, just as Brian talked about with iGaming, anything accessible would be set up with all the know your customer limitations that are in place now in terms of setting up who they are. So the reality is that an iLottery or iGaming platform really provides more player protections than a traditional retail location, because you have to go through that authentication process online.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions. Thank you again for coming out. There's been a lot of discussion about jobs and potential job loss. And you glossed over the live dealers, but one of these live dealer studios, how many people does it typically employ?
Thank you. It depends on the size of the operation. I mean, it could be anything from a few dealers to many, many dealers, since you have to deal 24/7.
And these are typically casinos without patrons. It's a sound stage, in other words, with many employees.
That's correct.
And these employees also have place to have lunch and eat and those types of things as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay. One of
You
the
might want to
things,
explain that a little more. What is this we're exactly talking about?
so we talked about live dealers and the ability to, instead of seeing some kind of static cards being dealt, you're actually looking at a live individual. Those individuals are employees. And when I looked at the ability to hire folks for MGM, it was very challenging because the math and computational pieces are very stringent. But for iDealer, you're really talking personality. And they're less stringent, but more opportunities for folks to have good paying jobs and wages. My second question is, I stumbled upon an Innovation Group's research for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you had stated that if there was a casino in Virginia across the bridge, MGM could see a 30% revenue drop.
That's correct.
All right. But your report did not talk about the 4 new casinos in Virginia proper that are all coming online this year, right? Danville, Bristol, Norfolk, and Portsmouth. Is that right? You did not touch those.
Well, the report in Virginia was almost solely focused on those. Are you asking if we commented on the impact on MGM
In
of those?
our study that you did for Maryland.
Oh, correct. Yeah, this was
You did
focused
not
on
take into
iGaming.
account
Thank you.
competition that is on the forefront from our neighboring jurisdiction.
Absolutely. That's correct.
And the significant impact that one would be, and we know that legislators in Virginia are already talking about putting a casino off the Silver Line in Tyson's Corner and the cannibalization that would have to MGM. Is it also true to say MGM right now, currently 35% of their workforce comes from Virginia?
I don't have MGM's workforce data.
I do.
Well,
35% of the workforce in MGM are Virginia residents. So that could potentially be an impact. And lastly, let me say this about the skins. There were some questions about whether you should open up the ability to get skins to the general public, or should they fall under the auspices of the casinos. Our smallest casino by slots and table games right now is Rocky Gap, and they've been seeing declining revenues. But if Rocky Gap were able to get an online operator, they have the ability to generate revenue and continue to be viable, even in the face of
their demographics in a declining market. Is that a fair statement?
It is.
Right. And so the online piece, these skins, if you will, have the ability to shore up some of our underperforming casinos. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. I think it's a fair statement that the casinos would benefit from being the master license holders.
All right.
Yes.
And my last thing is, you had mentioned the other states that came on with iGaming. You said they opened up during the pandemic. Is that right?
Some of them.
And so if we had another pandemic, and even with our sports arenas closed down, there would still be zero revenue generated from our current casinos because we would not have iGaming in place. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, if the casinos are closed and you didn't have iGaming, then yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I don't know where you are exactly on you had a number of other tasks, didn't you?
I think, listen, I think two of them relate heavily to what the COE is going to speak about. And so I think it's fair to allow them, airtime to do that. I think the remainder of the slides, the things that I would highlight, the one thing I would highlight is a nearly $200 million estimated black market iGaming market in Maryland today. I think, yeah. It should be that slide. Yeah, thank you. I think the only other thing that I would say again is that we did research with the American Gaming Association to measure the size of the illegal market in land-based gaming, so physical machines that aren't regulated, online gaming, and sports betting ranging from online sports to bookies. And so when we look at just the online casino portion, our estimate for Maryland's market, which is rough, but I think we're in the right ballpark, is around $200 million a year. And so we would expect that a regulated online gaming market would reclaim a large portion of that.
Okay. So that's the last point you needed to.
Yeah, I'm happy to conclude.
Great. Any last question for this panel? And then we're going to bring up, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We're going to bring up Mike Powell, Director of Office of Program Evaluation with DLS.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee, my name is Mike Powell. I'm the Director of the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability in the Department of Legislative Services. And I'm joined by Allison Binder from my office, who helped work on an evaluation at the request of the General Assembly of the Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. So what is the center? It began in 2012 and it's funded by the Problem Gambling Fund, which was established by the General Assembly in 2007 at the time that casino gambling became legalized in Maryland. And it's a little bit confusing where in the org chart the center is. They are a part of the Behavioral Health Administration in the Department of Health. But it is and has always been contracted with, and this is a competitively bid contract with the University of Maryland School of Medicine, in particular, the School of Psychiatry. So it's the contractor is the University of Maryland School of Medicine. And what do? They have a 24-hour helpline for people with gambling problems to call. They have peer supporters that can help those people. They provide no cost treatment to people who need to see a therapist for their gambling problem. And they conduct prevalence studies and other research, as well as some other things that they do. So where's the money come from and where does the money go? So most of the money that they get, and that's the red bar on the left, is from fees on slot machines. And there's also a small amount of money in the purple bar below slots. That's our fees on table games. And then the rest of it's just some sort of incidental stuff like rollover from previous years. And then where does the money go? So most of it goes to clinical services as well as research. And in recent years, an increasing amount has gone to public service announcements, PSAs, advertisements that you may have seen on television. And I want to talk for a minute because we focused on the center, but talk about gambling spending in Maryland just for some context. So the blue line at the top is spending on lottery in Maryland since the early 2000s, and that's grown from about 1.5 billion with a B to about 2.5 billion. The orange line is the casino gambling, so all types of gambling at casinos. You can see that has grown to about $2 billion a year. The dip in 2020, which was discussed earlier, was related to casinos closing and then opening at a limited capacity. And down in the bottom right, you can see this little line, gray line, which is for sports wagering. And this is just the brick and mortar sports wagering that came online maybe, I don't know, 18 months ago. But as evaluators, we look backwards and talk about what has happened to date. But I'd be remiss in presenting this if I didn't talk about why we started this about a year ago. At the same time, the mobile sports betting was legalized in Maryland. And in calendar year 2023, it looks like over $4 billion has been gambled from mobile sports betting. So if we updated this chart, that line would literally be off this chart as far as the amount of money that is from that new type of gambling. So problem gambling or disordered gambling, what are we talking about? So there's a diagnostic tool that professionals use to sort of tell what type of gambler you are. And, you know, as was explained earlier, 20 to 30% of the population would be a non-gambler. And then there are low-risk gamblers, at-risk gamblers, and people with gambling disorders. And I want to give you an idea of the kind of questions this diagnostic tool asks that people are answering yes to if they fall into that category of problem gambler. There are questions like, have you lied about your gambling or your gambling losses? Have you tried to stop gambling, but you haven't been able to? Have you stolen to pay for your gambling? Do you have relationship problems related to your gambling? And do you have job problems related to your gambling? So those are the kind of questions that people are asked. And if they answer enough of those questions, yes, they would be classified as somebody with a gambling disorder. And I will do the slides, but I'm going to let Allie walk us through the next few.
So in addition to the clinical services and things that Mike mentioned, the center also publishes research on gambling behaviors among the public in Maryland. The research is conducted by a team of researchers at the School of Medicine. At this point, they've done 4 prevalence studies, sort of look at disordered gambling rates in Maryland. So these were done in 2010, 2017, 2020, and then just recently in 2022. So they've shown a variety of different numbers in terms of people suffering from a gambling disorder at some point in their lifetime. The low estimate was the 2017 study, which put the number at 80,000 Marylanders. 2020 was the high at 400,000 Marylanders. This graph, which is also information taken from the prevalent studies, shows that between 2010 and 2020, there's been an increase in the knowledge and awareness of resources that are available to Marylanders that may be struggling with disordered gambling. In another facet of the center is their 1-800-GAMBLER helpline that they maintain. So this allows members of the public to access the different resources at the center. This can be done via chat, text, or calls. In the year 2022, those different types of communications resulted in 850 different contacts with the center.
Said hotline, I was watching a game over the weekend and I noticed at the bottom that there were multiple states that were involved in some sort of hotline. Is it the same one or are there multiple ones?
So if you call the 1-800-GAMBLER number, it's a sort of national number that will get you to a national center that I believe Maryland was the original 1-800-GAMBLER like phone number. It just served us. At some point that transitioned to where I think it's a call center in Louisiana, but they know where you're calling from. And so if you call from Maryland, they have a they know how to connect you with the center. They give you the Maryland script when you call it.
Gotcha.
In our evaluation, we looked at information on the Marylanders that are identified as problem gamblers at some point, both the probable pathological and problem gamblers, both categories that were looking for help in Maryland. This graphic is a 3-year accumulation of that data, but as an example, or to simplify, I would say that if there's 100,000 Marylanders that are suffering from disordered gambling in a given year, several thousand of them would have availed themselves of these services that are available. So the no-cost treatment that the Center for Excellence makes accessible to Marylanders is important. The medical community recognizes this disordered gambling as an addiction that's similar to a substance use disorder. So the fund provides treatment to these individuals without any cost to them. There's not a whole large amount of demographic data that was available to us, but we did see an even split between male and females accessing this type of treatment. 2/3 of those seeking help here are between the ages of 31 and 60. And this treatment is paid for actually combined between the Problem Gambling Fund and Medicaid users who access the treatment. Is about a 50-50 split.
I don't know if you're gonna get to it or not, but do you have any outcomes data?
As far as the treatment, no, we did access the Medicaid reimbursement data. You can see individuals that were treated for an amount of time. They stopped treatment. Maybe that's because they had been successfully treated. The centers here, and Mary Drexler from the center might be able to talk about what they know about people successfully completing treatment or successfully getting peer support or the other ways that they help people.
In terms of the amount that Maryland, the state, is spending on this type of treatment, we had data that allowed us to look at 2020, 2021, and 22, those calendar years. The state paid a little over $800,000 for treatment. The treatment is provided at no cost through treatment providers who are generally licensed therapists. They have training generally in the field of addiction. This particular bar chart shows the number of treatment providers that are available over time. So there's been a growth of about 50% in the number of providers between June 2018 and the end of 2020. These providers are spread through 5 regions across the state, and many of them offer telehealth appointments for treatment. We also looked at how Maryland compares to certain other jurisdictions in terms of their spending on problem gambling services. We should note that there's no federal funding dedicated to problem gambling services. And according to the National Center for Problem Gambling, only 21 states have at least one individual or more that are full-time employees working on this in this area. Maryland is ranked 8th in per capita spending on problem gambling.
And last slide, we had a number of recommendations in our written report, which is on the DLS website. I just want to highlight 2. One has to do with the voluntary exclusion program, which has come up earlier. If you choose to voluntarily exclude yourself at a casino, you are asked if you would like to be contacted by the center for maybe some peer support or other services. And our recommendation is simply to work with the the Lottery Commission to see if by default you would be contacted by the center unless you opted out. And then the second would be to diversify the revenue sources into the Problem Gambling Fund. Again, it's almost entirely paid for by fees on slot machines with a little bit from table games, but the lottery doesn't contribute to it. Sports gaming doesn't contribute to it. And those are becoming bigger pieces of the pie. That is all we had. Thanks for having us, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Question for you. I didn't see a duration for the contract award.
The duration for the contract with the University of Maryland to operate the center. It was renewed this year, and I don't know if it's a 3-year, 5-year, sorry. A 6-year contract, I'm told. Thank you.
A 6-year.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Ask the question do we have any evidence that the services, the treatment works? I mean, do we have any data that says, okay, I was a problem gambler and now I'm no longer a problem gambler, either because I'm not gambling anymore or because I'm not a problem gambler, but I'm still gambling? Do we have any data like that?
I don't have data on that. The center may, and I know anecdotally plenty of stories like that, of people who have helped and have recovered from that. But I don't have, we would have loved to have been able to do that analysis, but it's difficult.
I mean, it's difficult or it's impossible?
It was difficult. It was impossible for us given the data that we had available to us.
But do they have that data? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My apologies. Okay. Yes, they do.
No, they're fair questions. I mean,
They're coming up. They may or may not have the data. I'm with you.
no, they're fair questions. And I think,
Okay.
I mean, one of the things is the state provides us no cost treatment.
Yeah.
Would it be interesting to know like how many people successfully exit that treatment? Absolutely. Is that HIPAA protected person, information? Possibly. The other thing is plenty of people get treated that aren't paid for by the no cost treatment, so some people go directly to Gamblers Anonymous and they're helped there. So we would have limited visibility into the population of people with a gambling problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for you in regards to when we start talking about, with problem gambling, and maybe we some with lotteries, but debt, basically people going into debt, because obviously when you're problem gambling, that's a concern. Do you guys have, or maybe again, the lottery folks may have anything in regards to debt, like across the state, particularly like age groups 25 to 45 in those groups, as far as demographics, things of that nature, as far as, how many individuals are in debt, how many are maxed out their credit, things of that nature. It's not directly in your wheelhouse, but I'm sure you come across that per se, because people are kind of getting towards that way.
Yeah.
Obviously by the time they get you, because they've kind of maxed everything out.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, Senator, it's a good question. Our scope was sort of limited to looking at the center and how efficient and effective they were. We did toss around some ideas on like how we could better understand this universe of people. And one of the things we thought about was bankruptcy filings or things like that. But we just didn't have the ability to do that. And frankly, it was a little afield from the effectiveness and efficiency of the center.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's on page 5 of the slide. It says no cost treatment.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just a little confused. So age range of people who sought no cost treatment, this was for addiction, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it says age less than 10.
Yep.
2%. Is that like how many years they've been gambling, or is that the age of?
No, that's age. Trust me, Senator, when I saw that data, it caught my attention. What we had was limited. I do know that family members of people with gambling problems are able to be to receive treatment as well. So that would be my best guess, other than bad information that came from the administrative service provider. But yes, that is the information that we had.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for this panel? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask one question. How long does the individual have to stay in this program? Is there a time limit as to how long they can participate in this program?
There's probably a number of visits before at least Medicaid would cut you off, but I don't know what that is, but it's a good question, Senator. And the center's coming up and they may know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, with that, thank you very much, and we'll bring up the center.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to provide some information, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Director of External Affairs with the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore. We are very pleased to report that over the last 12 years, our center has become a nationally recognized resource in the field of problem gambling. And as the state contemplates additional forms of gambling, such as iGaming, we are confident that we have the expertise and experience to advise the state on best practices in this area.
I'd like to introduce Mary Drexler as the center director. She has over 17 years of experience in the problem gambling field. She was the director of the Council on Problem Gambling in Connecticut, and she coordinated the VEP, the Voluntary Exclusion Program, here in Maryland with the lottery. She's also a board member of the National Council on Problem Gambling. And take it away.
There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Budget and Taxation Committee for inviting us to speak today. I also want to thank the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability for the report, which I felt was really a fair representation of the center. They work closely with myself, with all my center staff, as well as with our community partners to do their best to fairly assess the work that we do at the center. I'm just going to briefly mention what the current charge of the center is, and our mission is and has been for the last 12 years to promote healthy and informed choices regarding gambling and problem gambling. We oversee the helpline that was discussed, 1-800-GAMBLER, and yes, that number was being used in Maryland before the National Council ended up buying the license from New Jersey to use it at a national level. It has caused no kind of disruption in our service. We get the calls that are routed, and it's based on the area code of the phones that call. If it ends up at another center, then they can warm transfer it to us as well. But that is a key point of access for the problem gambler and or their family members to get the support and resources needed to better cope with a gambling problem or addiction if it becomes disordered gambling. Another initiative we have, which we feel is essential, is public awareness. And that's our way of educating Marylanders about the risks for developing a gambling problem and how to access the support and the resources available for help for them in their communities. Currently, the center feels its ability to implement statewide public awareness campaigns is limited. The cost of paid advertising is extraordinary, that I've learned over the last couple of years. We do year-round continue to disseminate information through community events, through presentations, doing them for providers, behavioral health providers, just community organizations. And also we do our peers, which I'll talk about in a second, will also go in and talk to support groups at mental health and substance use organizations. But we definitely see an increase in outreach to help from Maryland residents reaching out for help when we are able to engage in the paid advertising. We see definite spikes in our calls, texts, and chats during that time. And currently, we're able to conduct a paid advertising for about 3 months out of 12 months out of the year. But we do see that when calls, chats, and texts. Treatment providers, I think it was referred to by the Office of Program and Evaluation and Government Accountability. We maintain a list of treatment, and what we call our provider referral directory, of providers who have agreed to engage in the no-cost treatment reimbursement system here in the state for individuals and families. So the no-cost treatment is available not just to the person with the gambling problem, but to the family members if they so seek that out. And these providers, like I said, are willing to offer the state's no-cost treatment through the state's ASO. Currently, we have 129 organizational providers and private practitioners on that list at about 137 locations across the state of Maryland. Adding to the list, though, has been a challenge, as when providers are approached to join, many, including our private practitioners, do not want to be reimbursed at the Medicaid rate. And in the past, working with the ASO, it's been a slow process for getting the reimbursement for the services that they provided. Also, which I think is really important, is to discuss our peer recovery services. It's crucial to the work of the center. The center currently has 5 certified peer recovery support specialists, but those 5 are serving over 700 residents right now. We're hiring a sixth peer at the end of this month. We hope to have a seventh one by the end of this fiscal year. But it's important to know that many of the people who call the helpline aren't quite ready to go directly into counseling and treatment. They want to talk to someone with their lived experience, someone who has been addicted, who's been in recovery and our peers all have been in recovery for longer than 2 years, many of them much longer than that. And they're instrumental in getting residents or individuals calling or the family members to the help that they're seeking, to the help that they need. Another large component of what we do is prevention services. And I'm going to talk about letters of what we call letters of agreement with community organizations. We provide small grants to different organizations to help us with our prevention efforts so people don't reach the point of where they have a gambling disorder. Some of these this year, we're going to have at least 24 of those grants going out, and they include colleges. We're doing grants with the 4 HBCUs and for other of the 4-year colleges here in Maryland. We hope to expand that to community colleges in the future. We also do it for youth organizations. We like to see youth doing peer-to-peer education because the younger you start gambling, the more apt you are to develop a gambling problem. And special populations. We're currently working with an agency, My Life, who's with the Asian population and working with them on outreach efforts. And we do a lot of work with veterans organizations as well. So I guess in closing, online and mobile gaming are stretching our resources. We're just seeing that with the sports. When it started, it was just in the casinos. When the 22 prevalence study was done, online and mobile wasn't in place. So there will be a 2024 study that's going to be completed. That should give us better data on that. But problem gambling is a public health issue, and sometimes we don't look at it that way. Sometimes people don't even recognize it as an addiction. So we have a long way to go there. But the taxes just on the table games and the VLTs now, which is what is going into the problem gambling fund and then dispersed, gets to the Department of Health, gets to the Behavioral Health Administration, and then some of those funds funnel to us. It's not going to carry us for the future. If we, I know we're looking at iGaming, potentially iLottery, but we're not getting any revenue from the sports betting, mobile and online. And if that's the wave, 90% of Marylanders have gambled in their lifetime, probably 85% over the past year. So I'm very interested in the 24 study that's going to be occurring because that will have mobile and online, having been in operation for at least a year. We need to consider how to expand our public awareness and our staffing. And when I say staffing, I'm talking about getting more certified peer recovery support specialists in place at our agency because they have been so successful in getting people to the services they need. Tracking how many people are actually accessing the no-cost treatment fund is one way, but a lot of individuals, we're meeting them where they're at, don't necessarily want to go to counseling. They want to go to a support group. They want to go to GA, family members want to go to Gamblers Anonymous. So it's not, it's not a totality of everything we do. We do keep data on all the individuals that the peers work with our center, and we keep that in a database, but you got to remember the confidentiality that goes with that when we're dealing with individuals who are working with our peers. We appreciate the evaluation points that points out that there is a need to diversify our funding to keep up with the pace of what Marylanders may be experiencing in the future. We want to continue to support Marylanders and be able to provide superior work to Maryland residents. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. When you said, I think you said 700 clients, was that the no clause that are taking advantage of no?
No, these are just 700 individuals who through our helpline were warm transferred to our peers.
And
Active right now, I think it's 688, but close to 700 are active. So they're dealing with them either daily, weekly, some maybe monthly. we keep them as on as a support system as long as the individual needs it. If we are trying to work with them and we lose contact for like 3 months to 6 months, then they may become inactive, but a lot of times they come back. We're also getting a lot of referrals as we've got this network of providers who are calling the center and saying, could one of your peers be an extra support to the individual I'm now counseling? So that increases the numbers. Even GA, which is a separate entity, all of my peers go to GA and they're getting referrals from people who need that extra support too that are granted by the center.
So those 700 aren't necessarily getting like a formalized treatment. They're
Getting the
counseling,
support, the help
support.
for resources. So we may be talking to them for an hour or
Yep,
2
yep.
hours or.
And so,
day.
and how many people are on average getting this, the actual treatment? And is that, what's the growth rate of that?
I can tell you who we refer to treatment. So when we get, in the last quarter, I believe we had 54 new clients. 47 of those 54 actually were referred to treatment. Probably about 30 of those actually made their first appointment. We can't know more than that because of confidentiality, but that's as far as we go. Regarding how many people are actively getting reimbursed through the gambling fund, I don't have those reports from the ASO. I know they're slowly getting them to the Behavioral Health Administration, so I don't have any of that information at this point. It's been a longer process.
Okay. And you said something about, did you say something about 2 years people were?
To be a peer at the center, we ask that someone be in recovery for a minimum of 2 years, and that's because it's difficult to speak
I see,
about it.
to be a peer, okay.
Yes, to actually become part of the staff.
Gotcha. Questions? Senator Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions, if I might. One, you talked about the grants that are available. Are they found on the online?
Yeah, we actually post them on our website when they're available. We send it out to our contact list of over 3,000. You know, so yes, there is an opportunity. We put it out in September or August of this year for this year's grants. I think we got close to maybe 30, 35 in organizations, and pretty much we have 24 signed LOAs now, but we still have an opportunity for more grants to be awarded.
Okay, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Training of counselors in your relationships with the entirety of the system and also the HBCUs and the community colleges, the center engaged in training up or identifying interns, those who may be interested in helping out with this ever increasing workload that you have?
Yeah, we do a lot of training of clinicians, private practitioners, organizations across the state. We do at least 40 webinars a year. We do at least 3 in-person trainings. So there's a way to educate them. We encourage these providers or these private practitioners to get certified internationally. There is no Maryland certification in problem gambling, but you can get the international certification with 30 hours of training in problem gambling and then receiving supervision as a clinician. So we do encourage that. And what was the second part?
And so from a curriculum standpoint, so for your social work and others, it's just a part of the curriculum now? It's or is this part of the addictive addiction? I don't know what the terminology is.
I don't believe problem gambling in and of itself is part of the curriculum at the university, but
there because of the center's outreach to all of the providers, it is being taught more and more.
Got you.
School of social work, psychology, counseling.
Got you.
There's an annual meeting that is free to the providers to come to, and they get full day CE credits. So there's literally hundreds and hundreds that are taking advantage of that. So
Gotcha.
it's really starting to be taught in the
Gotcha. That's quite encouraging. And lastly, if you,
I just wanted to say we had close to 4,000 participants in our trainings last year and our
Awesome.
webinars. So we're getting more and more people.
also-
Even people from out of state want to come in to the training
Yeah,
opportunity.
that's great. And lastly, my last question, you mentioned that you were not receiving funds to, did you say from the sports betting?
Oh, we did not receive anything when sports betting went mobile and online. There was no percentage.
So
for-
when sports betting went mobile and online, you did
Yeah.
not receive it.
Yeah, or when it was in the casino, we get it from just the tax revenue on the games.
If I might add, of the three buckets, the lottery, casino, and sports betting, only the casinos contribute anything to the problem gambling fund.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very
Thank
much. We
you very
appreciate you
much.
being here. Thanks to everybody for their participation today. It was a good briefing. I walked away with a lot, so I hope others did too. Thank you.
Thank you.